Okay, good evening. Tonight we're doing this part two in the learning of the Rebbe's Maimer, the Hasidic discourse, the first discourse that the Rebbe said 70 years ago on Yud Shvat, the 10th day of Shvat, the 11th day of Shvat. And we learned last week the first two chapters of this Maimer. And I just want to give a little recap of what we learned. And first, the Rebbe is talking about the Maimer is based on what the previous Rebbe issued on the day of his passing, to be studied on the day of his passing. Well, he didn't say that we should study it on the day of his passing. He gave it a certain date to be studied on the 10th day of Shvat. But he ended up passing on this day. And further, there's another interesting fact. The Frierdiker Rebbe said this Maimer in Taf Reish Pei Gimel, that's 1923. And he said this, and that was the very first Maimer that the Rebbe was present by the Frierdiker Rebbe. That's a very interesting fact, that this was the very first Maimer that the Rebbe heard from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and that very Maimer, that very discourse, the Frierdiker Rebbe issued instructed to print it and to be studied on the 10th day of Shvat of 1950, which was the day that he passed away. So the Rebbe takes this Maimer, and as he looks at it as this is the message to our generation. And our generation, the Rebbe calls us the Doira Shvi, the seventh generation, starting from the Alter Rebbe. And this is the mission statement of what is our mission? What is the mission statement, the mission of the seventh generation? So in the beginning of this, the first two chapters, what we learned is what it says in the Medrash, that in Shir Hashirim it says, Basi Legani echoisi kala. I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. Hashem says, God says, in this physical world, I had the Iker Shechina, the main part of the Shechina, the very essence of God's presence was in this physical world. And the Rebbe went very deep in explaining that what level of godliness are we talking about? And he explained that the word Shechina means Hashem's presence. We know the Shechina is here, God is here. But the word Shechina is a concept. It is the way, the bridge from one world to the other world. To bring down to this world, the Shechina is in each and every level. In each and every level, you have the Shechina, the level that comes down from the higher world to the lower world. That brings it down to the lower world. And when we say that Iker Shechina betachtonim, the main part, the essence of the Shechina was in the lowest world, we're talking about the very essence of Hashem, the very essence of godliness in the highest levels that was present in this physical world. And then he explained that there was the sins of the people, of the different sins that caused the divine presence to be separated, elevated from this world, and withdraw from this physical world. And furthermore, it withdrew even from the higher world, from one heaven to the next heaven. And he lists, the Medrash lists the different sins that caused it, and then he says that there were 7 tzaddikim, 7 righteous people that reversed the process, and they brought down the Shechina back to this world. It was Abraham was the first one who brought down the Shechina from the first from the seventh heaven to the sixth, and so on. And it goes on until Moshe, that he's the seventh. And what is interesting here is that the Rebbe points out that the Frierdiker Rebbe mentions Avraham, and then he abridges the citation from the Medrash, because the Medrash lists everything, and the Frierdiker Rebbe doesn't mention, just mention the first one, and then he goes to the seventh. The Rebbe points that out. Why? Because this is the message. The message here, we're talking about us, the seventh generation, as we'll soon see, that the Rebbe talks about not only that Moshe was the seventh from Abraham, but we're talking about us. We are the seventh generation from the Alter Rebbe. And he mentions that the Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the seventh, he brought down the Shekhinah, Hashem's presence, from the first heaven down to earth. And this was the main part of the bringing down, the drawing down of the Shekhinah. The main part is bringing down to earth. Because from one heaven to the other heaven doesn't make a big difference to us. What really affects us is coming down. And also the main effect of the main drawing down is bringing down to this earth. That really brings it down to the next level. And who did it? Moshe. And why was it Moshe? So he says the reason why is because he was the seventh, and there is a statement that says, Kol Ashvim Chavivim, all the seventh are cherished, are beloved. So the Rebbe points out, it's very interesting. That's what we're going to learn now. And today's in the third chapter. The Rebbe points out that the message, you read, if you're careful reading the message there, it doesn't say that all the cherished are number seven. They list a whole different things that are number seven and cherished, like Shabbos is number seven, there was Enosh is seventh generation, a number of things. But it doesn't say that all those who are cherished are seven, which would mean that there are certain people or the certain things that have special quality for themselves, and they happen to be number seven. But it doesn't say that. It says all the seven are cherished, meaning that has nothing to do with any quality that they have, just the fact that they are number seven. That itself is a good reason enough that they are cherished. And that is why Moshe Rabbeinu says, Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that gave the Torah. And the Rebbe connects it with us, with our generation, that we are the seventh generation, and therefore it applies to us as well. Our job is to bring down the Shekhinah down to this world. Let's see inside the chapter 3 of this Maimon. Okay, there we go. Vehine, says the Rebbe, Miloshen Razal v'cholashvim chavivim, the fact that our sages say that all those who are seventh are cherished. V'lo yikol chavivim shvim, it doesn't say rather than all those who are cherished are seventh. Muchach mizeh, it indicates she'ikera mailo ze shehu shvi, that the seventh primary virtue lies in the very fact of being at the seventh. And he's cherished simply because he is the seventh. Hainu, which means shechavivusoi einoi mitzad inyan atolui bibchirosoi retzoinoi v'avodosoi, which means that his cherishness, he is cherished not because of a virtue that depends on his choice, his desire, or divine service. No. But because he is the seventh. This is something that he's born into. And nevertheless, even so, even though being seventh is seemingly a matter of mere coincidence and not a product of the person's internal makeup or striving for growth, nevertheless, all those who are seventh are cherished. And therefore it was Moshe who was privileged to have the Torah given through him, which the Torah was the one that brought down the Shechina down to earth. Now the Rebbe says, soon after, it says that my father-in-law, my revered father-in-law, explained when, and the Rebbe says in parentheses, B'tchilas boy America, soon after arriving in America. And you have to understand that every detail that the Rebbe writes in this mimer is very carefully written, very precise. Why does he mention arriving in America? Because we are the seventh generation right here in America. When the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, that is connected to us, the seventh generation, because he's talking to us. Shegam be'inyan, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said then, Shegam be'inyan ashvim chavivim, that even when this it is highlighted that the seventh of this series is most cherished, Nikar Maila Sarishay, the unique virtue of the first is apparent. Why? Sharei kol inyan shvi hu shu shvi l'rishon. Because the meaning of seventh, what is the seventh? Seventh from what? Seventh from the first. So when you're talking about the seventh, that means you are seventh of the first. So when we're saying the seventh is cherished, because you are seventh from what? From the first. Moshe is the seventh from Avram Avinu. So we see the quality, we see the virtue of the first when you say that the seventh is cherished. And then the Rebbe continues that the Frierdiker Rebbe explained the uniqueness of the first of the seven. Our father Avram, mipnei avedosai, which he achieved because of his divine service. What was the divine service of Avram Avinu? So he points out that he carried out his service with self-sacrificing devotion, Mesiras Nefesh, giving his soul, giving his life. That's what Avram did. However, he goes on, but he's not sufficed with this, with the above. He's not content with the above. Umaisif oid, and he adds further the Frierdiker Rebbe, even though seemingly is not relevant to the central theme, so he adds the Frierdiker Rebbe, that being, adds the oifen mesiras nefesh shaloi chipes mesiras nefesh. Avram carried out his divine service with mesiras nefesh, and yet he didn't seek mesiras nefesh. He didn't look to sacrifice himself. It says shezehu efresh bein mesiras nefesh the Avram Avinu, the mesiras nefesh the Rabbi Akiva. He says this is the difference between Avram's mesiras nefesh and that mesiras nefesh of Rabbi Akiva. What's the story with Rabbi Akiva? The mesiras nefesh, the Rabbi Akiva, was gesucht mesiras nefesh. Rabbi Akiva, he set mesiras nefesh as a goal for his divine service. And what he's saying, he said, when will I be afforded the opportunity for Mesiras Nefesh? This is the story. Rabbi Akiva was, of course, one of the 10 martyrs. And when right before he died, they put him in the fire. And the story goes that Talmud tells the story that his students saw him smiling, and they asked, "Even now you're smiling? You're happy?" He says, "Of course. My whole life I was waiting to do for this opportunity to give over my life to Hashem. It says, you serve Hashem, we say, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol medecha. Serve Hashem with all your might, with all your soul. And here, I have the opportunity of giving Mesiras Nefesh. That was Rabbi Akiva. So he was, in a sense, it was about himself. He wanted to experience that, giving his life. Masha'enken ba Mesiras Nefesh. Avram. Mesiras Nefesh shaloi oya b'derech hagav. Avram's Mesiras Nefesh, by contrast, was incidental. It was incidental to his actual service. What does it mean? The Avram yoda she'ikar aveidahu. Avram knew that the main thing of service is k'mashakasav va'ikra sham b'shem avaya ke'elolam. He reflected the verse that says he proclaimed there the name of God, the eternal Lord. And the Gemara says, Al tikra vayikra ela vayakri. Do not read vayikra, that he proclaimed, but vayakri. He motivated others to proclaim. That was his job. His job was to make sure that people carry out the name of Hashem. They learn about Hashem. They talk about Hashem. They say thank Hashem and so on. That was his job. As yenazal oich shrayen. He motivated the wayfarers that he met, that they should also proclaim the name of God. And if it was in the course of this effort, Mesiras Nefesh would be required, he would manifest that quality as well. In other words, there's a story. There was once the Mittel Rebbe. The Mittel Rebbe was demanding from his Hasidim that they should go wherever they go. They should teach Hasidis. They should teach Hasidis. And one Hasid, the big Hasid of his, he came to the Mittel Rebbe and he told him, Rebbe, I have a problem. Yes, every time I teach Hasidis, I feel special. I feel good about myself. And what's wrong with that? But meaning that this is Yetzer Hara making him feel something special. So the Mittel Rebbe told him, you should become an onion of you, but you keep on teaching Hasidis. That the main thing is you have to think. So the Rebbe once explained what was his problem when he said that he was teaching. Now listen to this. The Rebbe said that his issue was he felt self-satisfaction that whenever he taught Hasidus, he felt that he's giving the Rebbe nachas. He's giving the Rebbe joy. That he's the one giving the Rebbe joy. Always I thought that he, what would he feel? What was he afraid of? He was afraid of becoming boasting, that people will look at him and he's the smart one, that he's a good one. No. The Rebbe says the problem that he felt is that he felt that when he teaches Hasidus, he is giving the Rebbe joy. What's wrong with that? It's a very high level. It's a very high level to reach. That shouldn't be the goal why you're doing things. It's not because you are the one who giving joy to the Rebbe. It's because the Rebbe is having joy. Because the Hashem is having nachas from what is happening. That was Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was about teaching Torah, was about other people learning about Hashem, proclaiming the name of Hashem. It's not about him doing something. So therefore, it wasn't about, he was looking, I want to give my life to Hashem. I want to connect to Hashem. No, he was so devoted to God that all that he cared was God. All that he cared that God's will should be fulfilled. If it happens to be that I need to give over my life for it, so be it. That was Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was one of that quality. Very, very high level. And now says the Rebbe that this is something that is required from us. We, the seventh generation, our job is to make sure that the mission is carried out. Godliness is spread around the world. People see what is the truth. That was Avraham Avinu. The Rebbe continues, so great was Avram's divine service and self-sacrifice, that Moshe was privileged to have the Torah given through him. Why? Because all those who are seventh are cherished, meaning that he was the seventh to the first. And Hashem said to Moshe, Avram al Tamid. The Holy One, blessed be He, told Moshe, referring to Avram, do not stand in the place of the greats. What does it mean? It means you think, Moshe, you're the seventh, so therefore you have the special, you're cherished. That is true. But don't forget that no matter what, Moshe is the seventh of Abraham. Just a second, please. So we have a Mazel Tov right here. Got the news. We just
Mazel Tov.
Our granddaughter, Levi, our Levi had a Meidala. Okay, middle of the shir.
L'chaim.
Make a l'chaim right there. So, Mazel Tov, everyone. L'chaim. Nu, we zijn een Sachidische Chassidische Nachas. Okay.
Rabbi Cohen, boy or girl? I missed it.
I made
a girl.
Okay. Mazel Tov. Okay. Breaking live news over here. All right, 1 second. So, Rebbe continues. True, the cherished quality possessed by the seventh is very great. And this status comes not as a result of choice, nor as a result of one's divine service. But as a finished product, as a consequence of birth. Happens to be you're born seventh. Hashem chose you to be born seventh. Nevertheless, so in other words, it's not something that you do for it. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, there are no inherent limitations that should cause an individual to say that this status is beyond him. The status of being the seventh to carry down this mission, that's beyond me. It is only accessible only to the select elite. Moshe Rabbeinu, he was the seventh. Is it affecting all his entire generation? Says the Rebbe, yes. On the contrary, it is comparable to the statement of Tanna de Eliyahu, and then explained, quoted in Hasidis, Shekol Israel, that every Jew, even a slave and a handmaiden, can have the divine spirit rest upon him. Everyone can have it. Similarly, each and every Jew is obligated to say, we're obligated to say, when will my action equal those of my forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? Can't say, okay, they are Avram, they are big tzaddikim. What about me? Yes, everyone can look to see how he will go reach into that level. Obviously, we're not talking about being as prophet, holy, but we're talking about the essence of the Jew that is in each and every one, and that can help him to carry out whatever challenge he has, whatever mission he has in his world, and not to be impressed by any difficulties. But now at the same time, says the Rebbe, darf man sich, darf man nicht sein gnad bei sich. Sorry. At the same time, we should not delude ourselves. We must know that we cannot stand in the place of the great. What does it mean? Yes, God gave you this mission, gives the kaiches, but don't think that this has to do with you. Don't stand in the place of the great. And that the merit of the seventh of a series consists of his being seven to the first. And he gets the empowerment from the first. He is capable of continuing the mission of the first. And the greatness of the first is expressed in the mission implied by the teaching, the Al Tikra Vayikra Ela Vayakri, do not really proclaim, but rather he made others proclaim, and that is our mission. The seventh is cherished because he who draws down the Shekhinah. Veloy oid. Not only is it drawing down the Shekhinah, Hashem's divine presence, indeed, the essence of the Shekhinah is drawing down. And it draws down where? That it draws down in the lowly world, in a world of today, of 2020, 2021, that this is where we draw down the Shekhinah in this chaos of this world. And the Rebbe concludes this chapter and he says like this. This is what is demanded of each and every one of us, the seventh generation, the Cholashvim Chavivim, all those who are seventh are cherished. Although the fact that we are in the seventh generation is not the result of our own choice or our own service, and indeed, in certain ways, it may be contrary to our will. We would rather be in a generation of tzaddikim or of the Rebbe. And I heard from Mashpia that perhaps it's also indicating to us today that we don't see the Rebbe in our flesh eyes. So it's not in our will to be in this way. Nevertheless, as the Rebbe Mikol Makoim, in a kolashvim chavivim. Nevertheless, all those who are seventh are cherished. We are now in the era of the Ikvasa Mashiach, the time when the approaching footsteps of Mashiach can be heard. Basiyuma de Ikvasa, indeed we are in the conclusion of this period. And our mission is Ligmair Amshochas Hashchina, to complete the process of drawing down the Shechina. Indeed, the essence of the Shechina. And where? In this, our lowly world. This was the end of the third chapter. We're going to learn the fourth chapter also. Now, the fourth chapter goes in a little more deeper concept explaining. And is going to explain why is it we say that God's presence was in this physical world? Okay. Why is it that God's presence is this physical world? Why is it that this is the ultimate purpose of Hashem to be in this physical world? I mean, after all, the higher worlds are more spiritual or holier. And the theme of this chapter is, the Rebbe is going to explain that we cannot say that the creation of the world is for the higher spiritual worlds, because in the higher spiritual worlds, there is a descent of God's light. So what would you say about this physical world? Is it a descent? Just a minute. So, but if the higher spiritual world is a descent, what about this physical world? Physical world is certainly a descent. So the Rebbe goes into a very deep explanation and understanding that our physical world can only exist because this is a creation by the very essence of God. Meaning that we, in this physical world, we feel ourselves as self-existing. In the higher world, the angels have no clue what that means. They could not understand what we feel. The angels, just like a light, when you see light, you trace it back to the luminary. And you know that there is a luminary. So when it shines light, you know there's a luminary, and the light is a descent from the luminary. But when you have a creation of a self-existing something from nothing, it can only exist because the very essence of God, which his essence is self-existing, the ultimate self-existing, he can create something which seems and feels self-existing. And again, which the angels could not comprehend. How could something feel and think that it's self-existing? It can only feel self-existing because in our self-existence we have the very essence of God. It comes from the essence of God, which he is self-existing. And our purpose is to transform ourselves and to recognize and realize that we are not self-existing, but we are part of Hashem. So let's continue here. Says the Rebbe in the 4th chapter, Ve'inei, after explaining in the beginning of the Maimer that the essence of the Shechina was originally manifest in this lowly world, and that afterwards Moshe the seventh, he always stresses the seventh, you see, he drew it down specifically into this world. So the Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe goes on to say, that the godliness was primarily revealed in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Holy Temple. Maybe Elzeh Pasuk, and he supports this statement with a pasuk, with a verse, the chsiv, that it says, it is written, "Ve'asuli migdash v'shachanti b'seichem." They shall make me a sanctuary, and I shall dwell within them. And here, we read in the verse, it's b'seichel lo ne'emar. Our sages comment, they say that the verse does not state within it, and that I will dwell within it, within the temple, but within them, which means b'seichel echad ve'echad. This implies that God dwells within each and every Jew. The Maimah continues that this concept can grant us an insight into the verse. Tzadikim yirshu oretz ve'ishkanu la'adalev. The righteous shall inherit the land and dwell upon it forever. So how would you understand this verse? Simply understood is that tzadikim, the righteous, inherit the land and they will dwell upon it forever because they inherited it. And but the inner Hasidic explanation is, he says that tzadikim yirshu oretz gan Eden. This verse can be interpreted to mean that the righteous shall inherit the earth. What is earth? Which is allusion to Gan Eden, Garden of Eden. Why? Because they cause he who dwells forever, the exalted and holy is his name, to dwell, meaning to be drawn down. Meaning that the reason why the tzaddikim inherit Gan Eden, because they draw down ad, the sheikhen ad, they sheikhen aleh, they make ad sheikhen, meaning dwelling on the earth. Because drawing down the Shechina on the earth, that causes the tzaddikim to have the Gan Eden. And it goes, and it says in parentheses, the Rebbe Rayat, the Frierdiker Rebbe, does not explain in the implication of the term "he who dwells forever" in the Maimer. But this concept is explained in Likutei Torah based on a teaching of the Zohar. And he continues, "Sheye begilu lemata." What do the tzaddikim do? They draw down the Shechina that it should be revealed down in this physical world below. Zeu Basi Legani Legnuni Lemokam Shoya Ikor Batchila. And the Maimon of the Frierdiker Rebbe continues, he says, this enables us to understand the interpretation of the verse, I have come into my garden and I have come into my bridal chamber, into the place in which my essence was originally revealed. The Ika Shechina B'Tachtonim Ha'isa, for the essence of the Shechina was manifest in the lowest realm in this physical world. Now the Rebbe goes to explain this concept that we just said. What is it so special about this physical world? Says the Rebbe, to explain. To explain why the essence of the Shechina was manifest specifically in the lower realms. Is the Rebbe. The ultimate purpose for the creation and the progressive descent of the worlds is what? The Nisava HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyos leizborech dira b'tachtonim. That the God desired to have a dwelling place in the lower worlds. Says the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe explains the above concept in the following manner. And he says, the ultimate intent of the progressive chain-like descent of the world is not the loftier spiritual worlds. Why not? Since for them this process constitutes a descent from the light of God's countenance, because the higher spiritual world, the higher, doesn't matter how high they are still a descent from the higher level. And it cannot be said that the ultimate purpose is for a descent. The Rebbe proceeds to clarify that that statement, giving two explanations. The following concept lies in the basis of both of them. He says, as is well known, he says, the abriya, the creation, urak bekoyach ratzmas. It derives solely from the power of God's essence. As stated in the Geras HaKodesh, this is part of the Tanya, in the epistle beginning Iyu v'chayei. God's very being and essence, whose being derives from his own self and who has no cause preceding him, he alone has the power and the ability to create something out of absolute naught and nothingness. In order to create something from nothing, it can only be from the very essence of ourselves. So thus the creation does not result from the revealed levels of godliness, but rather from God's essence. And therefore, it is impossible to state that the ultimate intent of creation was for the sake of the higher worlds. Why? Because even the loftiest level of the higher world, the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, is merely a revelation of which had previously been concealed. So if it's in a revelation that was what was concealed, that means that is a descent. If it was concealed, now it's revealed. Vim came, therefore it constitutes a descent from the light of the divine countenance. Because when the light of Atzilus were in the state of concealment, they were on a much loftier plane. In addition, since these are merely revealed levels of light, the mere rays of godliness, so we cannot possibly say that the essence exists for the sake of such revelation. Why? For God's essence is fundamentally higher than the revelation that emanates from it. So again, the whole understanding, the whole explanation, the whole rationale here is that the purpose cannot be something that you get a higher level to become a lower level. We must therefore say that the ultimate purpose of the creation is this lower world, a world that is imbued with God's essence. The essence of God is here. Because when a Jew does a mitzvah, he connects with the very essence of God. That doesn't happen in the higher worlds. When a Jew puts on tefillin and a Jew gives tzedakah, whatever you do, you connect to the very essence of Hashem. This is the very essence of Hashem that wants us to do this. The Rebbe explained in this week's Torah reading, which is Parshat Beshalach, in comparing the higher worlds and this world, that in this world, the created beings feel that their existence derived from their own selves. So you would think that this is a bad thing, right? That they're feeling that their existence is derived from their own self feels like how low we are. But the truth is that this is the opposite is the truth. The fact that we feel that the existence, that we're able to feel such a feeling that our existence from ourselves is because we are created from the very essence of Hashem, that his existence is from himself. The Haishata and the series of Maimorim published in connection with Rosh Hashanah this year explains the Efresh ben Nivra ve'oil. It explains the difference between a created being and light. The oil, light shows the existence of a luminary. When you see a ray of light, you trace it and you find the luminary. When you see light, when you observe light, its very existence indicates and reveals that there is a luminary from which it emanates. By contrast, regarding the created beings, not only do they not reveal the creator, they actually hide and conceal him. Indeed, they feel that their being derives from themselves. It is only that reason dictates that this cannot possibly be so. In other words, when you're born, if you didn't think about it, you would think that nobody made you. Came out of Big Bang, something. But when you use a little brain, you use a little understanding, you realize that it cannot be the case. But the very fact that you feel self-existing says something. Not true. The perception felt by created being that its existence derives from its own self is but its own false impression. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, nevertheless, the very fact that it is able to imagine that it derives from its own self, this results from its being rooted in God's essence, whose being is truth, his being in truth derives from his essence. Now we understand from the above. It is understood that the intent of the creation and the progressive descent is not the higher world, whose purpose is revelation, but this lowly world, which imagines that it is not a mere revelation, a gilui, but a self-sufficient entity. Was being derived from its own self. Now, what is the ultimate purpose? So Hashem created us, but why? Yes, we feel that we are self-existent, but what's the purpose? Says the Rebbe, through man's divine service in this world, by subduing the physical and transforming it into holiness, meaning overcoming the false perception of Yeshus, the independent existence that pervades the world, and revealing God's intent. This causes Nizgala Atmos. God's essence is revealed. And it is for this purpose that the worlds at large were created and underwent the process of progressive descent. So this is the end of the chapter 4. And we can discuss it now a little bit. Thank you for joining. Make sure to spread this mimer, to share this. And Bezrat Hashem will continue next week. Bezrat Hashem, same time. So,